I would, of course, like to recognize the protocol that was set with your permissions, Prime Ministers, making special recognition, of course, to Honorable Mark Brantley, Premier of Nevis. We are certainly privileged to have such a high-level panel here this morning, but I want to set the context by just repeating something that I heard said in meetings to me and to those in the meetings with me quite a lot over the last year by the boss that I had over the last year, which is that we're having a family discussion here today. And there's nothing that can be said amongst friends and family. Did I quote you correct? Was that it? Okay. That was usually followed by some strong words, but we're not going to get there. We're not going to get there today. Let's jump right in. And my first question really to our panelists is, and we heard the ED touch on it just now, the global financing gap for climate resilience and adaptation remains substantial. There's no way we can sugarcoat that, especially for vulnerable, small island developing states like ours. From your unique vantage points, what are the biggest barriers to closing this gap? And really, what immediate opportunities do you see for innovative solutions? Prime Minister Drew, we are in your homeland, and I would invite you to open the baton.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me say and start off by saying that the financing gap is especially acute in St. Kitts and Nevis, with the facts showing that St. Kitts and Nevis has accessed the least among our countries in the region. So we are very much aware of this. And so we have contemplated how can we really bridge that gap? What can we do at the local level in order to do that? One of the ways, and I was discussing with Ms. Duarte, that we can actually have the GCF, for example, in this case, embedded within our institution, an expert from the GCF who will help us to do that work to get our projects ready for presentation to the GCF in order to accelerate funding, for example. That, I think, would help St. Kitts and Nevis's position in terms of accessing finance. The other thing is to have a department, and I know the minister is already working on that, with experts who are solely dedicated to, across the whole of government, to make sure we can get our projects ready so that we can access the finance that is needed for us to do the projects to help us to transform our economy first and then adapt to the climate change. Both go hand in hand. We're changing the narrative, correct? Yeah. I also think that we can think of other innovative ideas. And I see that in Barbados, you have already started it, and that is how you can actually swap debt for climate action. And that swapping, I think, can help us to advance projects that are needed. But the innovative way that I think that can really help is to allow that funding to come up front. So, for example, we need water in St. Kitts and Nevis. Your water will not grow because we are seeking to address it, but we have an acute water problem. We are now spending about 50 million EC dollars, let's say around 20 million US dollars from our budget to respond acutely to our water shortages. That is going to take a significant amount. I mean, in St. Kitts and Nevis, $50 million, you look at our annual budget, is about 1/20th, 1/25th of our annual budget. So it's not something to sneeze at. And therefore, what we are saying, if we can have that way, where we can actually have the swap, where we can get that money up front to fund this project, that will be transformative for St. Kitts and Nevis and be an enabler for many others, the hotel industry, small businesses, create a climate to attract investors and so forth, that can have returns beyond the amount that is invested. So I'm saying one is to make sure that we have direct contact with the GCF by having persons on the ground embedded in our government and our institution to help to get us ready. And two, to come up with innovative ways of how we can upfront fund these transformative projects so that we can get to action almost immediately. So I say from our vantage point, building institution and building capacity, these things are critically important for us to get to where we want to get.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. An excellent way to begin. And I'm going to come to the Executive Director next. You would have heard the Prime Minister speak about essentially getting close to the region. We know you have some exciting news with respect to what your board has approved with respect to offices. I'm not stealing your thunder in any way. I'm not stealing your thunder in any way. But in responding to the question, please share with us from your vantage point what are some of the biggest barriers and what are some of the innovative solutions to overcome them.
Hello? Yes. So I need to take another position, of course, because, I'm looking at it from a global perspective. And so, Prime was reflecting on how to... Okay, let's hope this one works. He was reflecting on how to enhance access by St. Kitts and Nevis. And we do see in our portfolio that there are countries that have been better able to access funding vis-a-vis others. So we are acutely aware that what we call there are underserved countries, and we are trying to make deliberate efforts to make sure that they catch up in terms of access to that finance. But I look at it from a global perspective. And of course, from a global perspective, we do know that there's a tremendous financing gap. I sit here and we have a portfolio in our hands that is much larger than the resources that we have available, because the demand is there, because the needs are there. So we are in the process of engaging with our partners, with the governments, to make sure that we prioritize the resources we have to maximize impact and bridge these gaps in terms of underserved countries. But we do have the global problem, which is how do we really, now in the last COP, we know that the new collective quantified goal was approved, 300 billion annually to unlock 1.3 trillion. Where is this 300 billion gonna come from? And this 300 billion is not even enough, but in any case, if we meet the 300 billion, we would have already been making significant progress. And I say often that the system we have at the moment to mobilize public finance of the sorts that the Green Climate Fund has available is not fit for purpose. And it's too subject to the political changes that can happen internationally. So we are highly subject and vulnerable to political risk. So we really need to think hard about how do we evolve this system, and while we can continue to rely on the way it is at the moment and continue to encourage the countries that have been providing this finance to provide more. We have seen, for example, in the Green Climate Fund. Green Climate Fund is in operation for 10 years. The first round of capital raise that we did and the second were basically the same. This last round in 2023, now with the US have rescinded their pledge, is basically the same. So we are talking about a decade where the level of resources that come to GCF is more or less the same, but the impacts are increasing and the needs are increasing as well. So this system does not seem to be fit to respond. And so we need to think of what are the alternatives. One of the alternatives that are under discussion, difficult, again, in a geopolitical environment, is levies. Levies that can be collected globally. There are different types of levies, levies that can be collected by groups of countries, certain groups of countries. Because if there's an agreement around some of those, these would become a lot more predictable flows of resources that would be generated on an annual basis. So there are others, of course, there are discussions around using special drawing rights of IMF, there's discussions around carbon markets, but it is about time, I think, and of course there are efforts out there for there to be some coalition of the ambitious, some political strategy around pushing some of this. Because pushing some of this through, we hope that we will see it. There's the work going on in terms of the roadmap from Baku to Belen to explain how do we generate the 300 billion and how do we, with the 300 billion, unlock the 1.3. And I say this in this context as well. I know that the PM Motley and Bridgetown Initiative has been a big advocate for this. But I say this here because we need to be cognizant of the geopolitical times we are in. Looking at using that political capital to unlock much more predictable, less prone to political risk volumes of public funding that can be used, again, to target the most vulnerable, but to mobilize the private sector investments that are needed.
Thank you very much, Edie. Yeah. Thank you. Well, I was going to leave this question to later, but the executive director just brought us to this point. PM, the Bridgetown 3.0, the very first pillar speaks to changing the rules of the game, which I certainly think the executive director has brought us to. So from your vantage point, speaking to those barriers and really what the impetus might have been for making that the very first pillar of Bridgetown 3.0, and what immediate opportunities you see for innovative solutions, PM.
Largely because if you don't have a voice, you don't have the ability to change. And if you don't have a voice, you can't represent what your circumstances are. One of the beauties of Mafalda, your being here this weekend, is that you have been able to see firsthand that when we say that climate is affecting almost every aspect of social and economic endeavor in our countries, it is real, and infrastructural, it is real. The Bridgetown Initiative really, as I keep saying, it's not about Barbados. It was a collection of people. We use Barbados as a voice to be able to say, hey, stop. Right now we have a system that is not fit for purpose, that is not taken into account our realities as small island states. For 40 years or more, we have been feeling the effects of climate, but we never structured our conversation in that way to link it together. And what is happening is that small states continue, therefore, to find themselves seeing narrowing fiscal space because they are responding year after year after year to emergencies, whether in the form of the heart attacks of the hurricanes or in the chronic NCDs of the droughts and the sargassum, because those are insidious and eating at us day after day after day. Prime Minister Drew is the doctor, not me, so forgive me for the metaphor. But I want to thank the GCF for coming here because you've asked them how to close the financing gap. And the truth is, it is fundamentally through political will. And it is either going to be political will that is out of their fiscal space, which they have clearly shown now, that is less and less likely to happen because of the geopolitics of the world, because of the pandemic, because of the increasing debt loads that they themselves undertook in the last 5-6 years, or through their fiat by recognizing that if we continue to pursue a Westphalian system, one that is based primarily on the nation state and what the nation state can do, ignoring the reality of modern commerce through multinational corporations, where money is flowing and money is not being used in a way to be able to assist where truly it is needed. And what do I mean by that? We have certain global public goods that have to be financed, and we are not focusing on them in a way that gives it a dedicated stream. And therefore, if countries immediately say, I'm not interested in doing you, and I'm not interested in doing this, and I'm not interested in doing that, everything falls away. But if we had small levies that cut across the sectors that help contribute to the problem, and the world has for long accepted the polluter must pay principle. In the law of tort, those who are responsible for causing damage must be accountable for the damage. And we go one step further. Those who are going to benefit egregiously from the solution should also leave a few cents on the table to assist with the problem. The real core of the difficulty is political will. Don't let us fool ourselves. And we can keep spinning top in mud until we reach a political consensus. Now, the Bible tells us that we don't have to wait for all. And where 2 or 3 are gathered, we can do good work. And I think that that is where this conversation hopefully will carry us closer and closer. But I don't want to say much more to take up time at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I think you've termed it in the past the coalition of the willing. When you quoted the Bible just now, I thought we were about to pick up collection. But thank you. Thank you for that.
That's what I expect from the president.
Yeah. We will pick up collection. But you know, Executive Director, I want to hark back to the fact that we're having a family discussion. And so there are some thorny things we have to discuss here. And one, of course, you spoke on the funding aspect earlier and what is required, and certainly the Prime Minister has touched on the political will. But the GCF has faced criticism over the years, over the complexity of its funding approval process. And certainly for small island developing states like ours, to try to grapple with the processes could be somewhat taxing on occasion. What specific steps has the fund put in place to simplify access for states, and how can we, as Caribbean nations, position ourselves to benefit more effectively?
Thank you. You were very nice and kind. You said on occasion. So, it's been quite fascinating because I have worked in government, and I have worked in 2 of the multilateral development banks, and I have worked in 2 of the funds, of the large multilateral funds. And so I came to the GCF already with a perception that the system isn't fit in terms of agility and efficiency. And then, I'm confronted in GCF with, in some aspects, taking it to the next level. So, again, I come back to the point. To me, it's really important that we understand that, this is a problem of the system. GCF is part of that system. We have to fix internally. But if the infrastructure investment cap is billions and billions and billions, including in this region. And if we take the time that we are taking right now to get things done and get the projects on the ground and delivering impact, we are not going to achieve, on the mitigation side, we are going to miss it. And on the adaptation side, we're just going to compound the costs because we are not acting swiftly enough. So it's really important that, and we are in a system that is so risk averse that we haven't gotten this balance right of risk versus impact. We have to be prepared as shareholders of these organizations to accept that we're going to take higher risk, even in terms of the requirements and the processes, for the sake of achieving the impact in a timely manner. So this is the mindset that is necessary to shift. When we hear from the shareholders, We don't want any project with any problem. We don't want any piece of news in the media about any. That is not the mindset that is going to get us there. Let us accept that we might be facing more challenges in a part of the portfolio, but for the greater good of the greatest impact across the board. Right now, we have systems in place, institutional systems in place that are overly focused on risk and minimizing or abolishing risk, which is not possible.
Yeah, thank you. Please, come in front. Yeah.
This issue is so fundamental, not just to our conversation with GCF, but to our development conversation. We have inherited an Anglo-Saxon process, Western-driven process, that is essentially focused on risk because it's intended to maintain the status quo. And we continue to have people frightened to take actions or decisions because of the risk of being slapped down, the risk of going before the Public Accounts Committee, the risk of failure, the risk of everything. And in truth and in fact, therefore, you do not make the progress that you need to make. Bottom line is that we have to be able to put together a clear understanding of what is the public policy. You've heard me say it too many times, Daniel. What is the public policy we're trying to serve? What is the public mischief you're trying to avoid? And how can you effectively identify winners and losers? Because everything is going to have a winner or loser. Now, if all you're going to do is to preserve the status quo, then why are we in government? What are we here to do? If we're not here to be able to make lives better for the people who don't have a chance, why are we here? Now, in fairness, the truth is, and Mafalda, I feel for you, because effectively the UN system is perhaps the most Byzantine of them all in terms of the level of bureaucracy. And once again, that is intended to preserve the dominance of a few. Now, we have to find a way, as you have been doing, to be able to literally cut time off and on every process. And then we in the Caribbean know too, if you put a fella out there who never faced a fast bowler to go on the pitch and to go and bat, we get out with first Yorker, he want to run to the hospital. You understand? But if you put a man who is accustomed to it, all of a sudden he's playing shots all over the ground. Which brings me to the real point that Drew was making, my brother. Because what is really the issue? We have the 5Cs who's been doing good work, and you're controlling, what, about $500 million now in project preparations for the region, I suspect. But even then, you need more experts inside there to help you move quicker in terms of the turnaround on documents and the preparation of documents. Each of the countries in the region needs that institutional capacity. And I've said at home in Barbados that, look, the next 2 to 3 years, the whole country has to be a campus with training in situ, but we need to be able to bring in the additional people, which brings me to the last point that I want to make, which Mafalda, you and I discussed this weekend. And that is that, look, this thing called the Caribbean community cannot only be words. If we have come together in a revised Treaty of Chaguaramas to be able to deepen functional cooperation in a community of sovereign states, then we have to walk the walk. You spoke about how much funds are available to the region for project preparation. Yes, every country will have their own individual circumstances that they want to have attended to. But if each of us puts together, and I won't put this formally, and I will as chair of CARICOM, and Prime Minister, I know you're going to OECS meeting later this week, and I think that if we start there, and we start with the rest, and we can build out, that if each of us says, look, let us put $1.5 million towards boosting regional preparation capacity. Because separate from the individual domestic projects, the two big ones, and this is why I'm in St. Kitts this morning, the two big ones must be the regional debt swap, regional debt for climate swap, which allows us to aggregate, go to market. We will have individual guarantees probably because we accept that there will be some liability issues with respect, but we go same format, same time, etc., and capture the attention, because invariably, none of us are big enough to really capture attention in case we didn't realize. And then secondly, what you were discussing when I came in here, PM, which is securing regional energy at scale by pooling investment opportunities. Each country in the region is going for a little piece here, a little piece there, a little piece there. Can't command attention. But at the same time, when the president of the European Commission visited us last month at the heads of government meeting, she made it absolutely clear that Europe is going to produce 10 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030, but Europe also needs to purchase, to import 10 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030. Now, good Lord, if we have that opportunity, and we haven't started to look at Japan or the other opportunities in the North Atlantic, the truth is that, and it's not a pie-in-the-sky dream, Trinidad is already one of the largest suppliers of LNG as well as ammonia. And with ammonia in particular, they already have markets into Europe. So that what is needed is a team of people who come to work every day to do nothing else. And mercifully, I asked the Bridgetown Initiative, Bridgetown Unit, along with another public policy group to put together, which I've shared with heads, 3 decks that basically begin to show us that we are not even using 10% of the energy potential in the region that we have. If that is the case, how then do we ensure that we deliver the cheapest possible electricity to Caribbean citizens while aggregating all of the rest of the potential to be able to ensure that we can produce ammonia and to be able to ship the ammonia to markets that really need it, have them involved from the ground floor in the offtake agreements that have to be developed, and therefore to help bridge the gap with the lack of capacity that we have here with respect to being able to ready these projects. Now, if we can work with the GCF by putting together that assignment of $1.5 million US per country, that times 40, I'm not sure if Montserrat is a member of the thing, so 14 times 1.4, 1.5. That's what? 21 million US straight off. And by the time you then look at 1 or 2 other entities, IDB is trying to have and help with project preparation facility that the former Minister of Finance in Barbados, whom you know well, is working in Washington. World Bank, I'm sure, can also be persuaded to do that. So we begin to have, and the European Commission is in their interest to be able to dissect what can be properly done by them and what can be properly done by us as the suppliers of the energy. If we can do that, in addition to creating opportunities for mobilization of some of the excess domestic liquidity that we have in the region for this purpose, but also for domestic projects, then we will be well on our way. And sometimes I feel that we just need to shut everybody down in a room, take the decisions that we need to take, engage the people that we need to engage, and let them work every day and come back to us periodically with progress. But we have 5 years to supply Europe with this. If we decide we don't want to go to Europe to supply, we can go to Japan, we can go elsewhere, but whatever it is, we need to aggregate, decide, and move forward. And the project preparation is critical with it.
Thank you.
Right. What Prime Minister said is critically important, what she has said. I was speaking to Duarte this morning, and there are 2 things in the Caribbean that I think are critical. Energy, but trade is critically important as well with the debt swap that I spoke about earlier. If we were to get these 3 things done, it would help. But at the bottom line, the issue is political will. And that is why in my opening statement, I said, Mark, Premier, and I, we have decided that geothermal will not be a point of political difference, but will be used to bring us together. Without the political will, none of this is possible. One of the other issues that was mentioned is that as you go from government to government, let's say you have a change in administration, that can upset the whole trajectory, and investments you would have made would be lost. So I gave her the example of PAHO. PAHO, Pan American Health Organization, has a country appointed person, or not appointed person, they sent an expert to each country who set up a long-term strategic plan with PAHO. And when administration changes, the overall strategic plan continues. And therefore, PAHO has had, I would say, a good example of how you can carry a strategic plan or projects from one administration to the other, even if there is a change. So I would like to stress the point again, that political will is critically important, and opposition parties must be brought into the conversations so that the Caribbean can say, we disagree on a lot of things, but we have decided that we would resolve the issue of energy, we would resolve the issue of trade, the issue of debt swap for climate and agriculture. And crime as well, because that is critically important. So we need, as a region, to say, these are the things that we will not fight over, so that we can engender the confidence in institutions that from administration to administration, you will be guaranteed that the strategy and the political will must continue. So I think we need to agree at least on that and bring the opposition parties to the table to have the discussion. It worked in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I think it can work throughout the region. Thanks.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Just a lot, we got a lot to digest here in not a lot of time. First, I want to just endorse what PM Motley said with respect to capacity issues. It will shock most of you in here, I'm sure, to know that the Caribbean Development Bank, for several years, up until very recently, had all of one climate finance specialist. He's sitting right over there. So we have more auditors, evaluators, and risk assessors than climate finance specialists. It's completely ludicrous. So fortunately, we have a climate change coordinator on board. No, but he came from the 5Cs, so now they're one short. So we just shuffling the same expertise. So I'm happy to hear that our leaders are locked in on this, because we as regional institutions have to address it. PM, Drew, I want to stay with you for a little bit on the matter of political will, which has been spoken to, and the example of St. Kitts, Nevis, and working together. But with political will, of course, we need the support of development finance institutions once we get that right now. We know that you have been exploring opportunities, certainly in renewable energy, and specifically as it relates to geothermal. Perhaps you can share a little bit on that and what support you would have received. And if in your response you feel like mentioning any indigenous multilateral financing institution that has supported you, I don't think there'll be violent opposition to that in this room. But please.
Thank you very much. Well, just very quickly, as you know, that St. Kitts and Nevis is blessed, specifically Nevis, with geothermal energy. As a background and a piece of history, St. Nevis had the first hotel in the region. I think it was in the 17th century. And that hotel was centered around geothermal energy. Do you know what it was? Bath Hotel, when they offered the hot spring water. The rich from Europe used to come even back then to Nevis to bathe in the water that they said had miraculous capabilities and capacities. But it was just spring water that came from the volcano. That's all it is, sulfur water. And I said that to say that this resource now can be tapped again to resolve a critical matter. First, changing the narrative, our economic situation. As you know, our economy depended heavily on the CBI. You all have heard all sorts of things about the CBI and where it's headed. So we are up the objective that we need to diversify our economy. So we came up with a plan, a strategic plan called the Sustainable Island State Plan. I might call it the Sustainable Economic Plan, shifting the narrative. And in that, the center of it is energy, renewable energy. It just so happens that renewable energy is our gold or our black gold oil. It really, through economic analysis, and one was done by the IMF in 2023, that shows if we were to tap into the geothermal energy, our economic situation will transform almost overnight. And that was done by the IMF. So it was a critical analysis done from an economic standpoint, not even from a climate standpoint. And that geothermal energy that is on Nevis, that is why I sat with the Premier very early in my administration and said, you are my opposition, you run on a different party, you run against me, but let us agree on this. And he agreed. And so we started to approach institutions, went to the parliament, we passed a resolution to say that this resource will serve both St. Kitts and Nevis. That is the political will. With that, institutions started to gather more confidence. And as a result, I want to thank the CDB.
I don't think they heard you in the back.
Was innovatively given us access to finance through a grant loan process. It is so innovative. If we find energy, it is a loan. If we do not find energy, it is a grant. But they're almost certain that energy will be there, so they took the chance. And then the Green Climate Fund is supporting in multiple ways, even through the CDB, even the IDB. So we want to thank the Green Climate Fund for really stepping up to the plate in helping us. Put your hands together for the Green Climate Fund. And so, in a sense, we have created what I will call a climate ecosystem to support the geothermal project. But again, from my sister Mia Motley, it starts with political will. Because this had been on the table for many years and it could not move forward because of differences in the political agenda of various parties and administrations and so forth. So we are here today because of that. But let me also highlight that we also approached the Saudi Fund for Development and we presented to them. I then took the PS from the office of the Premier, who is my opposition, to, I have to stress it, to Saudi Arabia with me to make the argument before the ministers from Saudi Arabia with respect to the development fund as to why we're asking for support for geothermal on Nevis. And in very quick order, and they have a very strict process, but the process is nimble. A good example, they have approved $20 million to de-risk. Listen, to de-risk it at a very low interest rate with a long-term moratorium and a very easy way to pay back the loan. And so I want to thank them as well. So it's a combination of donation, grants, loans, other countries getting involved, all buttressed by the political will between the Premier and myself. And so today, with all of that, I want to say that geothermal is on the verge of taking off in Nevis. And if it takes off, I want to say to our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis and the wider Caribbean, that this will transform us. And to go on the point what Sister Mia Motley said, that can also be a source for us to produce ammonia, green ammonia, or to produce hydrogen, and then we can sell it. So we can become an energy producing, exporting country. Why not?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why not?
That's it.
And so when I speak about the sustainable island state, this is what I'm talking about. How can we transform our economy while at the same time protecting the climate and become a net exporter of energy? The last point I will make is that we have sun, and we have over a gigawatt. We have wind, and I'm sure we have over a gigawatt. And the geothermal, even though they're predicting now 1 gigawatt, we are sure that we can find more as well. And we only need, as a country, about 60 megawatts. So 60 megawatts, and a gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts. We only need 60 megawatts, and if you divide 50 into 1,000, you will see that you get about 20. So it's about 20 times exactly what we need, and that is why St. Kitts and Nevis is determined to become a net exporter of energy. That is our goal.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm mindful of the time, so let us coach it like this. And Edie, I hope you're familiar with the game of cricket, at least a little bit. I'm not, but that's okay. You'll get it. One ball. She's football. Penalty kick. But let's do it like this. One ball has already gone. We got 5 balls left in the over. You heard the Prime Minister mention it. 5 years left. 5 balls left in the over, and we have to make about 20 runs in these 5 balls. In other words, we have some batting to do over the next 5 years. Edie, fast forward 5 years. What does success look like for you in terms of closing the financing gap and being more responsive to SIDS?
All right. I mean, I was alluding as well in the morning, earlier on in my remarks. Success for us looks like having a portfolio of 50 billion, which is multiple times, gets us to scale significantly what we are doing in response of the needs. Success looks like targeting the most vulnerable, particularly SIDS, unlocking the private sector to the greatest extent possible, forging new partnerships, bringing public and private capital together. Success looks like this type of investments that we are talking about. And that's why I'm delighted to be here, and I'm looking forward to the next session and our discussions on transformative, really transformative regional and national investments where we bring different partners and capital together. Just this example alone of energy, the potential that exists in the Caribbean, not only to supply itself, to power itself at a much affordable rates, because you are net importers, most of the, and you pay a lot, and you are exposed to this volatility of the prices. So if we can, and there's a couple of other, as we were discussing here right now, if we can move forward in the regional integration, you know, facilitate trade in the region, and you will hear us speak about what's happening in the Pacific and the conversations that we are having in the Pacific. So energy, and become not just the energy security, but the exporter, regional trade, water investment. So many of the countries are facing water scarcity, using different types of instruments, including the debt for climate swaps. I want to pick up on another one that Prime Minister Mia Mottley and I were discussing also while I was in Barbados, skills development. We talk a lot about just transition. There will be a lot of skills that are necessary for these new industries. There will be skills for the new jobs. You know, and we are having those conversations elsewhere, in other countries, in other parts of the world. What could a strategy for the Caribbean be to drive the skills development, to supply to those jobs, to these new industries? So I'm excited about the prospect of us doing something in the years to come that are, and using the tools that can really be quite transformative.
Thank you. Thank you very much for, please, for the Executive Director. Thank you very much for that. PM Drew, we still have some runs to make. We only got 3 balls left. 5 years from now, tell us, what does success look like?
So I'll hit 1 ball, make 1 run, so I'll cross over, and then I'll let Prime Minister hit the last 2 balls.
This is a cricketer.
So in the next 5 years, what I will see from our perspective, as I said in the last segment, or the last question, St. Kitts and Nevis will be a net exporter of energy. We will see a transformation of our economy where we have water 24/7, low-cost energy 24/7. Industries knocking on our doors to set up shop in St. Kitts and Nevis because energy, water, and food are available. I will see our young people going to universities and even in our colleges here, learning the new skills for the new jobs, to install solar panels, to set up all of these fancy inverters and so forth that are needed in terms of transforming this type of energy into usable energy. I can see new industries in terms of data centers coming to St. Kitts and Nevis. I can see partnerships developing with other regions who are interested in our energy. I can see our climate, after all, coming back to where it used to be. In a sense, I will see a strategy directed at our own survival from a climatic standpoint, but that, of course, is married with our economic development. So I will lastly say that climate action for us is also economic action. For us, they are one and the same, and that is where I hope to see St. Kitts and Nevis and the region as sustainability areas to exist. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, PM. Excellent. PM, you have the last ball.
Well,
Bring it home.
mercifully, you get to score on top of the runs that have been made already. So I adopt everything that Drew just said. And really, I mean that genuinely, because his signal for partnership is really what is going to change the game. 5 years from now, it's not just St. Kitts being a net exporter. It's the entire region being a net exporter of energy. I've told you we're using less than 10% of our potential. At the same time, we are paying out, in our own case, over $1 billion in foreign exchange earnings just to import oil. It's unsustainable, and the truth is that in this geopolitical environment, it will bring us to macroeconomic instability very, very fast. He has spoken about the skills necessary. At the end of the day, it's not only to do the skills and to provide the skills among our people, but we have to come to the realization that even if we were to train every person in our population in the region, we will not have enough people to do what has to be done, because the Caribbean is significantly underpopulated and has to address that issue. With respect to the broader issues nationally, in our own case, we have set to become net zero by 2035, and therefore by 2030 we need to be seeing appreciable progress. If not, we're not going to make the runs on the board to win the match. And then, of course, we need to mobilize and unlock our ability to finance our own development. As I said, with that excess domestic liquidity, what is needed is to find guarantees such that entities that are non-traditional issues, not just this Caribbean Development Bank, but hopefully the new Blue-Green Bank, which is intended to be a market maker and for whom GCF has been also a key supporter. And when I add up all of that, the truth is that the Green Climate Fund has committed in excess in the last 7 years, or delivered $125 million in grant funds or guarantees to Barbados. And that is the equivalent of just about 2% of GDP. And I do not know of any other single country or entity that has played that role with us in the post-independence era. And that is why I'm here today to say to the rest of us that we're playing the fool, and that we have the capacity to move much more quickly, but we need to move together. And if we move together, then the notion of Barbados just issuing a debt for climate or a debt for nature swap can't just be an interesting conversation point, but that if we can get the region moving together, we now have an engine for catalyzing development, recognizing that if we solve the energy issues and if we build the resilience, or let me even put it a different way, if we can ensure that there is appropriate access for monetizing all the mitigation projects that there are, such that the government is then free, one, to pursue the adaptation projects for which there's usually very little revenue streams coming back to us, and secondly, to leave money for the things that we normally do for development. You cannot separate people and planet. So if we can do those things collaboratively, then I believe we can sustain the stability and build a movement for prosperity for Caribbean people while being good to the planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. So, two things in closing, family. One, I think in this shifting geopolitical landscape, as I had occasion to say recently, this is time to know who your friends are. The Green Climate Fund, by virtue of the scale of support they have provided to the Caribbean, underscored by their executive director being present here today, has demonstrated that it is a friend of Caribbean people and of Caribbean nations. And the second point I would like to close on is that, as we say at the Caribbean Development Bank, the Caribbean is not only our home, it's our only home. We have heard from two of our esteemed leaders, but more importantly, I think in this forum, we have felt their hearts with respect to the direction they intend to take this region forward. All that is left, therefore, for me to do is to invite you to join me in thanking our distinguished panel for an excellent conversation this morning. Thank you.